agency, Russia's air defense units have destroyed 53 Ukrainian drones overnight. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that deep strikes on Russia in retaliation for Moscow's offensive will not help Ukraine. Let's listen in.
Противник, несмотря на попытки упорного сопротивления, отступает по всей линии боевого соприкосновения. И на этом фоне киевский режим, стремясь продемонстрировать своим западным спонсорам хоть какие-то успехи, пытается наносить удары вглубь российской территории по абсолютно мирным объектам. Это ему не поможет. В настоящее время стратегическая инициатива полностью остается за вооруженными силами Российской Федерации. В этом году нами освобождено почти 5000 квадратных километров территории, 4900 и 212 населенных пунктов.
Moreover, the Russian Defense Ministry has announced the capture of 2 additional villages and stated that Russian troops are advancing in nearly all directions, particularly towards key Donetsk cities. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has reported that Russia is using oil tankers from its shadow fleet. Let's listen in.
Детально очільник зовнішньої розвідки доповів по тому, як росіяни використовують танкери свого тіньового флоту і не лише для фінансування війни, але й для диверсій та різної дестабілізації в Європі. Нещодавні випадки запуску дронів з танкерів – це один з таких прикладів. Наявну у нас інформацію ми передаємо партнерам, і важливо, щоб були відчутні кроки партнерів у відповідь Росії. На всіх рівнях заради цього ми працюємо. І будуть ще зустрічі, будуть перемовини з нашими партнерами, публічні і непублічні. Переконуємо, що треба не економити на рішучості. Росіяни повинні знати, що жодну їхню деструктивну активність, все підле, що вони роблять, світ без відповіді.
Ukraine's 63rd Mechanized Brigade has reported the capture of an Indian national who had been serving with Russian forces. The individual has been identified as 22-year-old Majoti Sahil Muhammad Hussain, a student from Morbi in Gujarat. The Ukrainian brigade has also stated that the captured Indian youth was previously arrested in Russia on drug-related charges and faced a 7-year prison sentence. But he was then given an option to sign a contract with the Russian military and evade his sentence. Moreover, Ukrainian military sources have added that Hussein has received 16 days of training before being deployed to the front lines in Donetsk in October 1st. He then spent 3 days in combat before surrendering to the Ukrainian troops. A video has been recently released by Ukrainian forces that shows the Indian youth explaining his circumstances and stating that he has never received the financial compensation promised by Russia. Meanwhile, India's Ministry of External Affairs has confirmed it is in the process of verifying the details surrounding his case. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Dr. Punchara Amarasinghe. Kotalawala Defense University joins us live from Colombo. Thank you very much, Dr. Amarasinghe, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at the attacks first, what are the potential consequences of Ukrainian claims that Russia is using oil tankers from its shadow fleet, and how might this impact the further sanctions or trade with Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, I think it's quite evident that war has come to a level of multi-domain escalations, contrary to how it began 2 years ago. So if you look at, if you seriously examine what is going on in the Russian-Ukrainian war front, it is quite evident the Russians are claiming that they have captured 5,000 kilometers within 2025, which is a critical and remarkable achievement from the Russian perspective. But against all odds, the Ukrainians have penetrated deeper into the Russian terrain, right? So they have opted for the indirect approach propounded by Sir Basil Needlehart, the famous military theorist, by attacking the Russian suburbs, by attacking the gas reserves of deeper terrains like in Siberia. And also they have opted for clandestine operations by assassinating top Russian generals, which has added one more brick to the Russian machinery. So as for the question that you raised, so this is kind of a tit-for-tat game going on. between Ukraine and Russia. So from my point of view, against all the odds, against all these defensive techniques embraced by the Ukrainians, right, with the support from the Western allies, the Russian army is still making a remarkable progress, and it moves ahead. So which is going to be quite a critical time for the Ukrainians in the days to come. You talked about the sanctions. Of course, the Russia has been imposed by dozens of sanctions since the inception of the war, but still the Russian war machinery has not been completely debilitated. So recently, Vladimir Putin clearly claimed that if Zelensky's government in Kiev is trying to get the Tomahawk missiles from the Americans, there would be severe repercussions. So I think we are too early to make any judgment about the final outcome of this great uncanny game.
And do you think we can still be hopeful about the U.S. leading ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, for that, I think my answer is quite ambivalent, because whatever the proposals initiated by Trump were not reciprocated by both sides, and we can entirely blame Russians, and even the Ukrainians were not very much willing to go ahead with the proposals as it indicated. But I think, if Donald Trump is going to push further and further, and if the entire European Union and if the entire North America are trying to hamper Russian economy, the imposition of the sanctions are going to be worked out. There can be, of course, certain consequences inwardly. But, it could have been easily achieved if Trump did not come to power. Under the Biden's administration, this problem would have been simply resolved through an array of sanctions, but now we have completely different games, different dynamics in the world politics. So I can't exactly predict to which extent the idea of the ceasefire agreement would be feasible in terms of the Russia-Ukrainian conflict.
And now looking at the news coming in from Ukraine about the student that was captured in the front lines alongside Russian troops, the Indian national, what are the potential diplomatic implications for India and Ukraine as well as Russia following this capture of Indian citizen, especially regarding his recruitment by Russian forces?
I think you need to understand, simply speaking, this Indian national was not the first one to be arrested by the Ukrainian authorities with South Asian background. And if you just go through the statistics, for past 2 years, dozens of Indians, Nepalis, and even Sri Lankans were captured by both sides. Some of them, the South Asians were working for both Ukraine and Russians, based on ideological convictions, based on financial constraints, and so on and so. So if you simply look at the status of the Indian man, I don't find that would lead to any diplomatic implications, because in international law, the role of the mercenary soldier stands absolutely a gray area, which is quite ambivalent, because Geneva Conventions do not provide adequate protection for the mercenary soldiers. Even under the Geneva Conventions, it is clearly indicated that if a mercenary soldier is captured, he loses. He doesn't have the status of the POW, prisoner of war. So I'm pretty sure this man has gone to war. He has joined Russian forces based on his own discretion, which was not the discretion from the government of India. And moreover, in year 2022, Vladimir Putin issued a presidential decree announcing that anyone can come and fight for Russia as mercenary soldiers. So that was kind of a guarantee issued by the Russian Federation. So they would, they were willing to purchase soldiers for money, mainly from the global south in places like India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, in the context of the South Asia. So my answer for your question is quite clear. That won't lead to any diplomatic implication or diplomatic halubalu between India and Russia, or between India and Ukraine. That is for sure.
And building on that, Dr. Amar Singh, can you give us more briefing on the fact that you've mentioned that this is not the first case that a South Asian national was captured in these war fronts, and how might this case of foreign national, especially South Asian, including his claims about unpaid compensation, will this have any influence on upcoming perceptions or the current recruitment of Russian military?
Yeah, notwithstanding the capture, arrest, and the brutal deaths in the war front, you know, the South Asians can't grapple with the Russian or Ukrainian winters for sure. So that is something stands above their perception. But contrary to all these brutalities of the war, still there is a greater demand. I can speak from the Sri Lankan perspective, and we have lost nearly 15 Sri Lankan soldiers in Russian war front. And one was fighting for Ukraine. He was one of our SF, Special Force officers, one of the retired guys, one of the most brilliant soldiers who fought in Sri Lankan civil war. He went and he joined Ukraine and he died there. And nearly 15 other Sri Lankan soldiers have made ultimate sacrifice in the Russian war front. But still there is a greater demand. I'm not sure about the Indian perspectives, but at least from the Sri Lankan perspective, our Ministry of Defense has clearly made stances and clearly made demands from the retired soldiers to not to go to someone's war. But still the money, right, the financial factor has been quite a, I would say, lucrative and inspiring factor issue for these people to go and join Russian forces as mercenary soldiers. Because according to the 2022 the presidential decree issued by Vladimir Putin, it clearly states that those who serve in the Russian war front, in the Ukrainian war, would be even eligible to obtain the Russian citizenship or the permanent residence in Russian Federation. So this is something quite appealing for people in our part of the world. I'm pretty sure you would understand this.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Amarasinghe, for joining us and sharing that insight throughout this news. Thank you. Now we move on. Swedish activist Greta Thunberg alleged on Tuesday that she and other Gaza flotilla detainees were tortured in Israeli prison. At a news conference in Stockholm, Thunberg claimed that they were kidnapped and tortured by Israeli forces, saying she was denied clean water while others lacked critical medication. Israel's foreign ministry has not responded to the claims but has repeatedly denied mistreating detainees. Thunberg was part of the Global Smooth flotilla, which tried to bring aid to Gaza. She was detained with 478 others and deported on Monday. Israel has dismissed the flotilla as a publicity stunt aiding Hamas. Meanwhile, Irish detainees also reported mistreatment, with one calling the experience sadistic and inhumane. Let's listen into what the activists have said.
Jag blev precis släppt från ett israeliskt tortyrfängelse i öken. Och ärligt talat så vet jag inte riktigt vad jag ska säga. För oavsett vad vi säger så finns det inget som biter. Det finns ingenting som leder till handling från våra regeringar. Trots att under internationell lag de har en rättslig skyldighet att agera för att förhindra och stoppa folkmord. Det som hände var inte bara att Israel kidnappade oss och torterade oss, utan att framförallt under ett pågående eskalerande folkmord där Israel uttalat försöker radera hela Gazaremsan och det palestinska folket, den palestinska nationen. Israel återigen bröt internationell rätt och förhindrade humanitär nödhjälp, mediciner, mat, vatten från att komma in till en svältande befolkning. Men det här har sagts tusentals gånger redan, och som sagt, det biter inte.
In the, say, the 5 or 6 days that we were incarcerated, no access to doctors, no access to medicine, no contact with the outside world, no lawyers, no yard time, and one of our comrades, I don't think he'd mind me saying, a 75-year-old man trying to bring baby formula to a besieged population, was taken out of his prison cell at 2 o'clock in the morning, guns pointed at his head, and all he was asking for was his insulin. They wouldn't give the man insulin for 3 or 4 days. In my opinion, they were very happy to let him die.